Hello, welcome along. This is JPC's panel for International Women's Day 2024. If you don't know JPC, it is a marketing agency specializing in ABM, brand, nurture, and customer experience. And for today's purposes, perhaps more importantly, it's a business that in its 2021 year history has been run from the start by female leaders. I'm Nick. I appreciate the irony is not lost on you. I promise that I am the only pale male and at my age increasingly stale person that you will see today, because what we have is a panel of spectacular, extremely talented women from marketing. So first, Claire Ellis, managing director of JPC, celebrating 25 years in agency marketing, and been in charge of JPC, holding the reins of JPC for since 2016. But what I wanted to ask you is the soul of the business is female led from the start. Tell us a little bit about that.
It absolutely is. And I think, so yes, since we were launched about 1998 by Jeanette Pritchard. So she is the JP of JP Creative, or JPC as we are today. And I think at the heart of the business from that first day has been a belief in really nurturing talent and recognizing that great talent can come from anywhere, right? So when JP started out, she absolutely, lived a belief of can do. Can do sits at the core of the business. So a real sort of entrepreneurial spirit and a belief that you can do anything if you apply yourself, irrespective of gender, age, doesn't matter. So JP, living that spirit, she went for a major Nokia pitch at the age of 28. She fought off major, big established agencies to win that opportunity, and then carried on with initiatives such as launching Brand Amplifier in the late noughties, which was our charity to nurture and grow young female entrepreneurial talent again. And then, so yeah, I stepped into the shoes, big shoes, right, in
Yeah, yeah.
2016. And I really wanted to make sure that I continued living JP's vision, but also bring my own interpretation of that. And I think my interpretation is just, as I said at the beginning, that talent really can come from anywhere. So whilst we have, a really strong female representation in our business, and many of our senior team are female, many of our younger members are female as well. And yes, I've seen some, really great empathy that they bring to the business. And I think that's really relevant when we're in helping clients with sales and big sort of marketing opportunities. Having that sort of empathetic element can really be important, and an intuition. Equally, yeah, I'm not going to lie, some of our greatest project managers are female, but at the same time, some of our greatest creative talent comes from the men in our business. So I think the point I'm getting to is that, we believe really great teams come together from every single different angle, gender, pronouns, age. They're just not things that preoccupy us in JPC. We're much more interested in how can we blend all of those unique talents to really create that hybrid, superpowered team. And I think it's that helps us really achieve great results for our clients. So we win multi-million dollar tenders for our business, for our clients. Sorry, and it's testament to that spirit at the heart. But yeah, JP's can do is what we live by. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question, but something I'm quite passionate about.
It's been a great hour. Thanks for joining us. Fine. There we go. Right. Next to Claire is Pam Conway, Group Marketing Director for Biffa, the waste management company. You would know them from the bright red bins, but heritage-wise, Pam comes from some of the biggest names in marketing, so Leo Burnett, Ogilvy One, and then via engineering giants, so British Gas, Drax Power, and now Biffa. Quite, tell me if I'm wrong, quite male-dominated organisations, I would have thought.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that's true. And it was interesting, I never intended to work in utilities and energy, and I ended up there through the marketing route. And it was a really interesting experience moving from energy to waste, because just when you think you've reached the zenith of the most complex male-dominated organizations, you then find that there's more. But I love it. I love where I am. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I also worked agency side for the first half of my career. And I started in the 1990s, and agencies in the 1990s were completely different from agencies today. And I think the way that cultural norms and societal norms have changed has been dramatic. And I can see that in the culture of the agencies I work with and in the culture of the organizations I now, lead teams for.
And in a good way.
In a good way, yes. It's
Yeah.
it's positive improvement. In the 90s, you talk about the lads culture. That was very evident in the agencies I worked with. Going into bigger corporate organizations, where I think right from the word go, there was more of a sense of the responsibility and obligation you have to the teams that are working for you. Even in male dominated organizations, there's a real desire, I think, to embrace diversity across all the different spectrums, not just gender.
Fabulous. Pam, thank you for coming today. Next to Pam is Neha Rajesh, heads up Google's Chrome OS marketing across EMEA. So if you have, if you've got a Google browser, you now know who to say thank you to for that. She's built her career on developing multi-million-dollar marketing pipelines in technology firms, but also you are the founder of wonderwoman.org. So I've asked these guys about their work. Tell me about wonderwoman.org.
Absolutely. So thank you. I think you said a mouthful there. But in terms of, yes, I work at Google and I started my career at Google 3 years ago, but I've been in technology since the very start of my career. And I've actually worked in technology with an intersection of very male dominated fields like banking and financial services. And my background is I moved to the UK when I was 20 to study. And when I graduated, it was incredibly hard to find a job. It was the peak of the UK recession, and it was just for immigrants, particularly like visa sponsorships and things were a barrier. And that sort of opened my eyes to challenges that people face when not only climbing the corporate ladder and progressing is great, but like getting that first step, and we talk about the broken rung, but there is another step, which is the first step of the ladder. It's really hard to get on there. And I know that I was not alone. Me having a master's degree, finding it hard to get a job really opened my eyes to how others must be, struggling with various challenges. And one thing that really helped me is kind of finding really strong sponsors and mentors for me in every organization that I worked for. And that sort of inspired me during the pandemic to start Wonder Woman, which is an organization that connects really powerful female figures, influential people from my world, with anybody in women or girls who are out there like seeking their first opportunity in tech or in any career. And it just sort of connects them to start a conversation and help each other on their journeys. And just help girls open that first door for them in the world of work, which is an opportunity I received from someone, and that set me up for success for the rest of my career. So that was where it was born from during the pandemic. It's been going for 3 years now, and we've connected over 100 people through the program. So really proud of it, and really supports what I personally believe in and my story as a woman in tech.
And wonderwoman.org?
That's right, yes.
Excellent. Lovely. Thank you so much. Antonia, I'm so sorry. We will come to you in a moment. I will introduce you properly. You mentioned the broken rung, and this is a theme that's sort of starting to come up. Please give us a definition.
Absolutely. So a lot of people are very familiar with the glass ceiling, which is the concept that women can reach a certain point in terms of seniority, but can't reach the very high levels of an organization and assume the C-suite. But broken rung is obviously a concept that's not being talked about a lot in the early 2000s, but is really gaining visibility now. What that essentially means is that it's really difficult for women to progress in the middle management layers of an organization. So whilst organizations may proactively push women, to get directorial and C-level positions because the glass ceiling is so popularized, the broken rung is where women get stuck and there's less mobility. So I think that's the concept of giving opportunities to women to progress through middle management so they can ultimately go and crash the glass ceiling.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Antonia, I apologise for keeping you waiting for so long. Our final guest is Antonia Barton. When we say C-suite, Antonia's done the lot. You've collected the set. CMO, CPO, CCO, which I assume was commercial, rather than one of the other CCOs, in a whole bunch of telco and media properties, so cable and wireless, Now TV, Sky, and culminating in, I'm going to have to read this because it was so long, global brand marketing and commercial operations for BT. That's a remarkable CV. Thank you so much for coming here today. We were talking about the broken rung at that group level, and both of you guys operate at that rarefied air. Are more women achieving that higher leadership level?
I mean, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. Like you ladies, I have come from an organisation which I'd say is historically predominantly male. And also, I think personally, I came through a route that was quite male dominated. So when I left school, I went to do a maths and computer science degree, which I was probably in 15% of people on that course who was a female. And that in itself was a sort of bit of a start to life of, oh, how's this going to go? Now, I never set out to do technology marketing, so similar to you guys. But actually, what an incredible route it's been for me. And actually, in a way, I feel like in some ways I've had more opportunity by going down this route than I have potentially taking some of the other routes that a female may have taken. And I think that's just because I'm fortunate that I've got a level of confidence, and something I'd love to discuss later on in this panel is about confidence, because for me, I think this is where a lot of women sadly fall short. Certainly, especially when they get to the sort of the broken rung piece. And confidence is a really important part, certainly of my career, and how I've got up there to the top.
So are more women achieving that? We talked about the broken rung, but that top group level.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, but I say it cautiously because I still think, and certainly for what I've seen, more probably 5 years at BT, there is a massive push on diversity and inclusion. Goodness, I mean, we all know it's everywhere you look, everything you read. Everybody wants to get there and everybody wants to achieve the targets, but the proof is in the pudding. And the big thing, certainly in corporates, from what I see, is you have got to start it at the top. You have got to lead by example. And if you start up there with a C-suite of men, you will find naturally it is quite hard to then get, or it's certainly the optics of it at the moment still feels like naturally you end up with more men in leadership positions as you move down. And people who are junior in the organisation, they need to look up and see these female talent, these female leaders, and know that they can get there. So I think the ambition is there, and I think we are certainly nudging the dial in that direction, but I still think there's a long way to go.
Can I just interject there? What do you think the barrier is, or what are the barriers that are just limiting that progression at the moment? As in, why aren't more corporates? It feels like a lot of, as you say, D&I is massively on the agenda.
Yeah.
Certainly when we've worked with some clients, we've seen it can still be in a quite tokenistic capacity.
Yeah.
So what do you think corporates need to do to make that change?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things actually. So first of all, I mentor a lot of individuals, and they are really, really talented women. Most of them are mothers, and there is an inbuilt chip in a lot of mothers, which says, "Oh, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can manage that next step up, because I've got children. I need to pick them up. I've got to get up in the morning." Just the natural worries that a mother carries. And a lot of them just won't even open their mind to the possibility that they probably could do a more senior job, even with their family life. It is possible. And by the way, I'm living proof that you can do this, by the way. But secondly, there isn't the pool of talent. So, I mean, I sometimes empathise with corporates because they've got these targets to hit. And, you will see them go, well, we've had to put in 80%, 7 out of 10 men and 3 women, because there just weren't the people coming through for the roles. So I think the really important part in this is we have got to nurture, I would almost say it's that middle management layer. Certainly from what I've seen in corporates, there's plenty of junior people who are, and I'm sure this resonates with you, there's a lot of junior talent there, and they start to come up and then they just get stuck. And it's back to the broken rung principle. It's then mentoring them, nurturing them, empowering them, and giving them the confidence that they can go for these roles, and they've got to give them a try. And also, unfortunately, it's also mentoring the senior management to be bold enough to let some of these people have a go at these roles because they can do them.
I'll just pick up on that. I agree about the talent pathway and creating the circumstances and the situations in which people feel that they can balance family and work life. And for me, the broken rung piece is no coincidence that that's happening at a middle management level, which nowadays is mostly probably around the time people are thinking of having a family or just had a family. And so that's less about people going, no, we don't want women to progress. It's because the practicalities aren't necessarily there. And just speaking from my own experience, I went back after having both children after 5 months. We didn't have the same maternity packages there. I had no family support. And so it was very stressful. And both my husband and I had to work very hard to make it work. And we got through it. But it was difficult and it was challenging. And, we were lucky that we were both in good enough jobs to be able to pay for childcare, right? So childcare and access to childcare is a real challenge. So I don't think it's necessarily that women don't have the wherewithal or the desire. Some of it is the situation and the context. And I wonder whether we need to consider more enlightened policies around things like paternity and maternity leave. Does it always have to be the mother that is the stay-at-home caregiver? Could it be the father? Could they have the same access to that kind of thing? So for me, there's a lot here that's about the practicalities and being really honest about what it's like for younger people today moving up through that talent path and how we give them the access to these things that make it easier.
I'll just maybe add one more thing, just an example from my career. So I don't have kids myself, but 80% of the women who have reported into me have actually had children and gone on maternity leave during the time they were on my team. And one thing that I want to pick up on that actually people brush a lot under the carpet is when a woman comes back after maternity leave, after possibly taking 8 months to a year, there is a significant period of self-doubt and a significant period of losing your mojo, right? And women have admitted to me personally, like on my team, saying, I don't remember the action items from my call, but I remember exactly when I need to put my boy to bed or bathe him, right? And I think that you need to recognize that there is a ramp back period that women have and really be open and supportive about it. So at Google, we offer all mothers coming back from maternity leave, like a significant period of ramp back time where they can work flexibly, work part-time after they come back from their full leave. And I think having policies that, to your point, that are structured around enabling that is super, super important.
I've actually got a lady that's working with JPC, and she is in a more fortunate position where her husband has a really super, super paternity package with his company. So, she said, right, she's recently set up her own business. And she said, I'm having a baby. I'm going to be back to work in 3 weeks because my husband's going to, take on the baby. And I did think at the time, okay, this is ambitious, but she's an incredibly bright, sharp, powerful superstar lady. But actually, to your point, I've seen that difficult transition she's been trying to make. And despite having her husband there, literally holding the baby, I think the underestimation for her of how much time she really needed to focus, get back into the work mode, and actually how to create that balance, because you still, I think, as women, feel like you've got to be superwoman. You feel like you've got to be the best mother in the world. And Lord knows I had my children a long time ago. And now I look at my peers having children today, and I just think, dear Lord, how do they manage all of these activities for their children on top of just getting, I used to get my kids to, before and after school club, and make sure I was there to drop them, pick them up. And I used to think I was doing a pretty good job with balancing a career as well. Yeah, just seeing that, that's a really lovely initiative to hear, because I think if more businesses were offering that transition and making it not feel like a negative as well, that we need that time.
And by the way, linked to that is also it's not just about maternity and babies; it's the menopause, which again is, I almost slightly felt awkward just even saying it then, because it still feels like it's something that isn't fully embraced. And I raise it because, again, it is another quite significant phase of life that a female needs to go through that will impact some people. Some people are lucky, but majority of people, will suffer some sort of anxiety or stress, or, it impacts different people in different ways. And again, I mean, I will say all credit to BT for really embracing that and making it a very non-taboo topic at work. Lots of forums, lots of opportunities for females to get together to talk about it with their bosses, and bring men into it, which again in itself, historically might have been awkward, but trying to bring everyone onto the same page to explain actually how it does affect you, and actually to kind of help you through that part of your career as well.
Well, let me pick that up because the menopause is on the agenda in a way that it wasn't 5 years ago. And now, Pam, you started this about 10 minutes ago by saying we need better policies. Neha, you mentioned Google's policies. We live in troubled times politically as well. I'm really interested in where you feel the role of business in general is in representing the interests of women, but also diversity in general, right? If we, the definition of a company is a group of people, and it's a group of people trying to get something done, whatever that something is. It seems to me that businesses more than ever have a role to play in nurturing their employees, women included. Should businesses of all sizes be doing more?
My 2 cents on this, and I'll be short. If it's not a policy, it doesn't exist. That's a short line for me, because a lot of businesses will write fluffy pieces on their website about how they're driving DEI initiatives and how they support people from all walks of life. But when it comes to operationalizing that, very few businesses actually have it written down as a policy. So yes, we have very flexible maternal and family work policies. But then when you actually start looking at it, it's like statutory maternity pay. So ultimately, I really do feel that if it's not a policy, if it's not formalized, if it's not something that's built into your contract, there's very little point like talking about it as philosophy.
I think I would agree around the policies to create, as we said, the conditions to help people succeed and to kind of be the best that they possibly can. But I do think there's a role in leadership as well, because you can have all the policies written down in the world, but if you don't have good leaders kind of enacting that or being empathetic or understanding their teams and supporting their teams, then you can follow the letter of the policy. But if you're not following the spirit of what you're trying to achieve, then I suspect you're not going to succeed. And I do think some of this is about having the right kind of leaders, the leaders who believe in this, the leaders who naturally want their teams to succeed. And, I think the two pieces go hand in hand. And we hear a lot more these days about the empowering leader, the leader of others and the leader of self.
I think you're absolutely right, and that sort of comes back to the point in my rather long soliloquy at the beginning of this panel when I was talking about JP, and also I want to pick up on your point, because you're absolutely right. Something we are experiencing as a smaller business, and as we are growing, and we have a more diverse. When I say diverse, I mean geographically team, and we have people working flexibly, so more people at home more of the time, and culture has always been incredibly strong at JPC. But I realised quite recently that it lived through almost the flip. It lived through those leaders. It lived through JP being present, through probably me being present and just, instilling that confidence in our team. And actually, in the last few years, post-COVID and trying to transition to this different working model, it's definitely become a little diluted, and the need to write things down a lot more and actually have those policies that people can refer to, and making sure that when we do come together, we have something called Culture Club. Again, being honest, over the COVID period and trying to readjust as a business post, it wasn't as active in the business. And it's something that it was founded by JP some 20 odd years ago. It's always been there, and it's a program that's run by the team. But it lives and dies by having that leadership and having JP and I at the helm to really encouraged the team to come forward and contribute their ideas and give their feedback and build that confidence that you spoke about.
And I'm actually less for the policy, actually. Not because I think it's wrong, but I'm more about the actual living and breathing and just doing it, the culture. So for me, I couldn't agree with your point more, which is I think it's led from the top. And I think the leader of that team, that organisation, needs to be creative about what are the challenges. And you can, if you don't have the answers to that, you can do that by bringing the team together and asking them what's on their mind, how does it work, and then brainstorming those, but then putting in communities, putting in whatever it is it needs, get-togethers, social evenings, I don't know, whatever, to discuss and tackle those points as a group. But I think for me, it's around making all these things just much more commonplace, much less taboo, much more talked about, not just for women, women and men. In fact, it was one of the things as well at BT that I just think is so important. We had the women's network and all these things, and sometimes I didn't almost feel comfortable with that because I didn't want this massive push of women in work, and and I loved your opener actually because it's the power is in the diversity of the mixture of talent you have, no matter who you are and what you do. So I think very important when you set up your communities, whatever you do, to make sure you have a balance of men and women and not just purely drive all of this stuff just for the females.
I really wanted to pick up on that point. Thank you, because you said at the opening of this session, you almost apologised for being the man here in the room in this, International Women's Day panel, and it was exactly the reason I wanted to be here to that point, because it is about actually not all about the women's initiatives. It's how do we actually help men feel comfortable with some of those taboo subjects, because you're absolutely right. You said you felt a bit uncomfortable even talking about the menopause. I feel uncomfortable talking about it because I don't want it to be something that is marginalised for a woman. But equally, I feel uncomfortable because I think, have we done enough to help men really be able to understand and work with us? So it's not that sort of one-sided thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts
Well,
on that.
it's about authenticity, isn't it? I mean, and that comes back to something that, gosh, I think everyone has said somewhere here. So you said leadership, and again, so if you see it happening at the top of an organisation, it becomes normalised, and that's important. And nobody's used the word authenticity yet, but it needs to be authentic. That's partly about leadership. It's partly about, you said, sort of developing a culture and an environment that that isn't just oh, this is the ladies or whatever. So everyone feels like they are involved and a part of it. To your point, Neha, which kind of if it ain't written down, it doesn't happen. I feel that's absolutely true. That makes perfect sense to me. But that's the sort of checkbox policy problem that's been the hassle for DEI for so long, right? And that's why we need the leadership from the top, and then the grassroots organizations from the bottom, the little groups, the gatherings, the coffees, and all the rest of it that make a culture. And we're trying to work out how to nurture a culture, because if you just say, this is our culture, then it's a waste of time and it all falls apart. But if you seed it and then it starts to grow by itself, then you get somewhere. I think that's probably a very inarticulate way of saying what I think, but there you
I
go.
think the culture point is critical, but you can't rely on it top-down grassroots and it'll meet in the middle. Sometimes that, if the organisation is huge, and our, BIFA's 10,000 people, and I'm sure BT's even bigger. And if you're just relying for it all to trickle down and trickle up, you sometimes, that's why you have policies, but sometimes why you also need those groups. So I know that in BIFA, they set up the Women in Waste group and have actively encouraged men to be a part of that, to have a kind of safe place to talk about those awkward subjects, because it's really hard to talk about that over the kind of coffee machine. So having those environments where you can tackle those topics with men in the room and have a good debate is really healthy, because it brings people from all levels together to have those conversations. And some great ideas come out of it too. And I think, back to your point, is actions, not words, are really important. And actions determine culture, not words. And one of the great things I've noticed that's come out of BIFA is, for example, female PPE. I can speak for myself, that I got a high-vis jacket wouldn't really go across the chest properly.
They
So
never do.
they never do. And so then you get, this is a great initiative where they, invested in PPE designed for women and with women's bodies. And that's a great thing because that is action, not words. And those kind of things begin to send signals to the rest of the organization about what we're like. And those larger groups end up having smaller group discussions as well. And that's when your culture begins to happen. Because policy is one thing, but it tends to be a written document that sits on the server. I was going to say in the cupboard somewhere, but obviously that's 30 years ago. But sits on the server somewhere, and then people refer to it as and when a situation arises. Whereas if you're living and breathing it every day in the things and in the actions that you follow through on, then people begin to believe in it. And I think that's what you need in the middle.
And that's super important what you said. It's basically people coming together, having a conversation and really making noise about a subject is what led to something gaining enough momentum that it became formalized.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what needs to happen. It's like people need to create safe spaces for others to come and share ideas and share things that are really issues everybody face. And if enough people rally behind it, it can actually become something that the company starts taking seriously. So it's coming from the top, it's a grassroots movement. And then ultimately when you have things coming from both directions, it then starts to like crystallize into a nice way and benefits everybody.
Yeah.
So I think that's super inspiring to hear that story.
Confidence.
Yes,
Was it
that's
confidence?
yes.
Go on.
Oh, I've got a lot on this. So, look, I mean, I think it's easy to say this as somebody who's fortunate enough to have a level of confidence, I think, in my career where I've been able to feel like I could put myself forward and push everyone aside and I'll just go with it. But I think this is the one area where we need to help females who are at the broken rung level or even below to try and deliver on their ambitions or help them to understand they can do these roles, they can get there. Not just about seeing the people up there, it's the belief that they can actually do that. Now, we can look at many different ways of doing that. I think you have sort of two people here. You have people that are quite confident, who, you just have to nurture and help. And then you have, unfortunately, the vast majority who probably aren't so confident. So then it's thinking about, well, what can you do for those people to try and nurture them and help them to get forward? And for me, there's all sorts of things on that. But there is mentoring, there is empowerment programs, there's all sorts of things. But I mean, that is really around a coaching program to try and understand what it is that is holding people back and why at one level. And then there's obviously another side to that, which is the organisation making people feel more like they can come forward for these. But confidence, I think, is absolutely key, and the main area that I think females need to develop on. And I just want to give you a quick anecdotal on this, because to give you an idea of when confidence can get knocked and how easy. So I'm actually interviewing for roles at the moment, and I see myself as a relatively experienced, confident, easy to talk to person. I went forward to an interview 2 weeks ago. It was a third interview stage, and it was with a panel. And when I turned up, I had a meeting with the HR first, who was a delightful lady, and we had a really good chat. She'd interviewed me with the group CEO the week before, and I was so excited about this interview. I really thought I was going to get this job. Anyway, I went in, and it was 3 men interviewing me on this panel. And right from the start of the interview, one of these men took it upon himself to give me a fairly arrogant intro to who he was, what he did, how successful his part of the business was, the fact he was married to a marketing director, so he knew a lot about it, and went off on one. And then the other 2 sort of carried on. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning the story is because within about 20 minutes of this interview, it was an hour-and-a-half panel, I genuinely sat there, lost all my confidence in this, making me go cold even telling you this, in this interview. And all I could think about was the fact I got another hour to go and how was I going to do it, and that I just couldn't do this job, actually. And it was because he literally in this interview was trying to belittle all the answers I had, always had one better than me, and just was chipping away and showing off, actually, if I'm honest with you, in front of the other 2 people. And it was the most horrific experience I've ever had in an interview. And I had to sit it through. And it was an hour and a half of hell. And I couldn't wait to get out. When I got out, I felt all awkward because I just totally lost it. I mean, I didn't lose it as in cry or anything, but, I'd lost it as in my confidence level. And I came out, I went to the loo actually, and I sat there and I thought, oh my God, like, what was that? Was it me? Can I not do this job? And of course I had to sit down and have a think about it. Anyway, I spoke to the headhunter and obviously very quickly phoned up the girls and my husband, who quickly knocked me back into shape and brought me forward. But I'm mentioning the story because I just want to tell people that I think if you suffer from lack of confidence, that's one thing. And we need to do everything we can to help it. But even the most confident people who feel well prepared can still end up in situations where you will come across people. And I thought, how could that have gone better? And I two things for me. Number one, it was being bold enough to feed back. So I fed back to the organisation, and I'm afraid I told them how the interview felt, how people conducted themselves, and that I was careful what I put, but I said, I really feel this could have been conducted in a whole different way. And I pulled out actually of the process. I mean, I imagine they probably didn't want me anyway at this point, but I pulled out. And secondly, it just made me think it should have been a more diverse panel. And it was back to the diverse piece, not because I think, well, I think in this example, it was just one of those times when I think had there been a more diverse panel and more people there to represent my view, what I was coming from, I think the interview would have gone better. But the point I just wanted to make is, confidence is really, really important, but it can even get you and catch you out even further on.
I agree. And do you know what? I'm sure your family have told you this, but you're well out of that.
Yes.
Because if that's the kind of people that they're putting up and that's how they treat you in an interview and interrogate you, then it's not to do with you, it's to do with them. And the culture there must be a bit toxic at the top, I would say.
Awful.
So, my observation of that is two things. One is, I think that's character, not gender. I've been in lots of organisations where I've had women treat me like that. Wow. And it's not just men. And that's, I think, about character and integrity as well as anything else. And you might have had a better representation with a different group of people. But if that's the kind of culture they're tolerating at the top, then I suspect the people who've made it to the top are very similar like that, regardless of their background. So that would be the first thing, you're well out of it. The second thing is, I agree around the confidence piece, is even in environments, and great environments where people are doing their best to kind of be inclusive and listen to everybody's opinions, we can't help ourselves, we're humans, right? And so we can be a bit forthright and determined and unintentionally knock at people's confidence because we're just so confident about our own opinions. And I think that's especially hard for women, even at a senior level, because I think the voices tend to be softer and we tend to be, I think, more ready to listen to other person's perspectives. And so therefore, and are more likely to try and find the balance and appease, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do. So that ability to have a good exchange of ideas in a forthright way and still have confidence about your opinion, even when somebody else is going, no, you're wrong, that's really tricky. And I think that is only learned through experience because it's really hard to teach that until you're in the situation. And to your point, if you're coming into new jobs in organizations as a younger female and experiencing that early on, it's very hard to recover from that. So the more we can do, I think, as you say, around mentoring to support is really important. And I would just say this because, again, I've worked with people, colleagues, peers, same level, who will look at me, and I think it's partly because I'm Scottish and I'm redheaded and I'm pretty fiery anyway, that, I don't take any nonsense. And they'll turn to me and go, I really like how you just answer people back. And I'm going, I'm not answering back, I'm just being confident in my perspective without being aggressive.
Yeah, and that's super important. Like just going back to having young people on your team and people who may be junior and already dealing with a confidence gap. when you do that to people, it sets an example. And also, like, it's really important when you see young people dealing with situations, because there's bullies in every layer of the organization, and you don't need to be super senior to do what that person did to you. So imagine you have a team and your team is facing those bullies. It's so important to have their back and to sometimes go out of your way to make a point that you have the person's back, but also to show them a way of dealing with difficult people, right? Because that's a responsibility I think managers have, to lead by example, and to show that, if somebody's challenging you, challenge back in a respectful way, but hold your ground and have the argument, because you need to break through that mold.
Yeah, and it's that. If I was going to be teaching anything to my team, and one of the things that we always focus on is how to say no, and being confident to go, I disagree, and here are the reasons why I disagree, and then to have a two-way conversation about it, and also to have the confidence to admit you were wrong, but not feel bad about it. You go, oh, right, I see your perspective. Yeah, you're right. I was wrong here. But I'm not going to feel bad about that, because my opinion or view was based on the information I had at the time. You've given me some new information, and that's really enlightening. But it takes confidence to be able to say no, to say I disagree, to have a discussion or a debate or an argument, usually, and to admit you were wrong and not feel belittled, undermined by that.
I think, again, I've been running some mentoring programs with some of the more junior members of my team, or in fact at many levels of the team. And one of JPC's biggest mantras, I mean, A, is the positive no. We have to be able to do that.
Yes.
Because when you're helping a client on a bid situation, there are times you've got to really constructively say, this isn't the right approach. But equally, the other big mantra is not being afraid to ask the stupid question.
Yeah.
But I've realized that's a really easy statement to make, much harder to deliver in practice. So we literally go into really, really simple techniques and ways to actually, and particularly as, again, we're living in this much more hybrid world. So our teams are very often having to try and build relationships over a screen and have that command and presence and be able to ask a client a difficult question. And particularly, a lot of our clients are in the tech, your industries. So, a best piece of advice I actually had years and years ago was from my father, believe it or not, as a VP then of IBM. And he said, Claire, you will sit in many meetings where you'll hear 1,000 acronyms. And he said, ask them what they mean. And he said, I guarantee 9 times out of 10, they don't actually know the answer themselves. And they're glad someone sort of called out the elephant in the room. But again, I think that can be difficult, again, irrespective of gender, when you are a more junior member of the team. But I think sometimes, again, a lot of the women in my team can feel, that they are the quieter, less sort of vocal, commanding person. So the techniques we look at are literally as simple as, I give them tips. I'm not probably showing it very well now, but I generally always have a pen in my hand on a call, because I'm giving them sort of tips on how to keep their body language calm and all these things that are, more difficult to control when you are sort of on video calls. So, some really sort of practical techniques I think are really important, as well as the more gentle mentoring and coaching. And one of the things we do is a lot of playback sessions, just actually asking them how they feel on a one-to-one basis, so they feel it's a safe area to speak freely. But how do you feel that went? What do you feel you felt? Where did you feel uncomfortable? And then we can just sort of play back and give them some techniques to help with things like that.
I've got one more little nugget as well, I think, that I'd just like to share in terms of helping women with confidence, which is, so the first one is, I really think people should get mentors. We've discussed that one, and I think we've probably all got mentors amongst ourselves, and that is that sounding board. I think internally and externally is important. Internally, because then you have somebody who knows the organisation, may or may not know some of the characters, but can actually give you quite useful guidance or support because of knowing the organisation. But I also think an external mentor is really important as well.
That point about controlling body language, one of the things I found through my career is this continuous feedback about being too emotional. And we can see what you're thinking on your face. And I'm going, really? Because I don't really know what I'm thinking, and you can see it on my face. Is that something you've come across and you think that younger people are still experiencing, this idea that to feel things is bad and to have that appear in your body language or your face is bad?
Yeah, I think you need to be true to yourself, actually. I think you are who you are, and that's what makes you a special person. I don't feel like if I was talking to somebody or mentoring someone who was more junior, if they had a strong habit, or as you were just saying about the pen, body language, or they kept flicking their hair, or I used to bite my nails all the time. But there's certain things you have to train yourself out of. But I think in facial expressions, I don't know. I mean, I think it's part of your character and who you are. So I mean, I start to think that's probably getting a level I'd be uncomfortable with, to start to say to somebody, don't change how you're appearing, or whether you're smiling, or how you're feeling, or facial. Yeah, I think that's a level too far for me.
I think I've experienced the flip side of it. I think I'm a very emotive person. So I don't think you can read things on my face, but some of the emotions I got in other ends, I'm always smiling. I'm always like, cheerful and bubbly. And people pay a lot of compliments in that regard, right? Like, I don't know if I should, it's a backhanded comment, or if I should read into it, but I've always received comments that you're such a bubbly person, you're so smiley. I love your energy. Like, and it sort of communicates a little bit more in terms of like how you are in terms of interpersonal skills and how you deal with situations. So I feel like although I have received a few comments, I've never perceived it as a negative thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially when it's people are praising you around your optimism and cheerfulness and so on.
I get your point, though. I think, I wouldn't want my point to be misconstrued, because there's a difference, absolutely. Always guide everyone to show up as their authentic, natural self. The only time we talk about body language actually is when it's things that the team have raised that they feel uncomfortable and self-conscious about. So when they are aware that they are a particular fidget when they're nervous. So it's very much techniques actually to boost their own confidence and how they're projecting themselves. But we absolutely focus on stay authentic, though, because the minute you start trying to be a sort of carbon copy of someone else, then you're not being you, you're not being real. But I hear you, because I think it can sometimes, and again, I've seen it more in bigger organizations. It sort of can be fed back as, oh, you're being a bit girly, or you're being this.
Hang on, maybe I've been lucky enough to work with very, very nice people, but there was a time when businesses were about competition. When people wore kipper ties, and everything was like a sort of like a really bad car dealership. Modern business is now not less about competition and more about collaboration. And I just are you still seeing businesses acting like it's a poker game where your facial expressions are something to be, assessed and judged? Is it? I mean, how awful if it's like that?
I will I will just say something, because as you were talking, another thought came to my mind about my comments. So I do receive a lot of comments about the bubbliness and the positivity, but people who work with me day in and day out, like, I'm not robotic. Like, there will be days when I'm serious and not smiling. They will ask me, "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Like, you don't seem completely like in it. Is everything okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm doing everything as I need to, but I just don't have the same levels of energy. So I generally think it's probably better to stay away from commenting on people's expressions and making assumptions about their state of mind or their performance or what they're bringing to work, because you just never know what's bubbling under the surface. So even if it's intended to be positive, I think probably my recommendation would be to not steer in that direction too much and read what's happening under the surface.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect I'm talking about earlier on in my career, not these days. And obviously, as you get more senior, there is a bit of self-control you have to, because my natural self is very passionate and spontaneous and impetuous, and that's not always a good thing. And so in a work environment, you do have to be more considered. I think it's a reflection on the earlier days in my career that comments about emotion was alongside with the kind of inferences because you're a girl. You're more likely to get upset about things. You're more likely to be passionate about things and not have a good debate. You're going to lose your logic or reasoning as a consequence of that. And I think that was the inference earlier on. And I didn't know I was going through the menopause when I was going through the menopause. And it was only afterwards, with reflection, that I suddenly realized this was happening. And I had a particularly torrid time at work. Somebody would only have to say something to me in a meeting, and I'd suddenly tears start rolling down my and I'd be like, I have no idea why I'm doing this. I've got to escape. And my colleagues didn't know what was happening to me. I didn't know what was happening to me. And all of this was at a time when I was trying to project more of a person who's ready for the next level. So it is, I think, being able to talk about these things and talk about what's happening with your body and how that affects your emotions and what that might mean in terms of your career is really important.
I want to. We've covered an enormous amount of ground in the past sort of 20, 25 minutes. We talked about culture. We've talked about creating an environment, mentorship, individual sort of management skills, something that I'm going to call everyday confidence. The confidence to be your authentic self every day and push a little bit further and be heard. The importance of being practical. Now, we do have one luxury in that all of us have corporate careers. And we've been in organisations that are large enough to give us at least give us the financial support to make a difference. So, what have you seen in your careers that works? What could somebody watching this right now implement in their organisation or push into their organisation that you guys have seen moves the needle, makes a difference, and nurtures women? So, mentorship would be a great example. So, I'd actually sort of ask you that. Go on, Claire. What have you seen that works?
I think it's pretty simple in my mind, and it's sorry to keep using the word, but it's things that are authentic. So I mentioned Culture Club at JPC. I've mentioned some of the initiatives that we've introduced as a business, but I think the ingredient has been, yes, they've been led from the top, they've been lived from the top, but they've also been absolutely in respectful collaboration with the team. So we haven't sort of sat there and said, okay, guys, we're all going to even defining our vision, our mission, our values. We have workshopped those with our team to ensure that everything we do is believable. We make sure it's in the way we recruit. Our values are a part of our interview process. Nothing is just, if we feel something has become tokenistic, a bit stuck on the wall, a bit, checklisty, we stop it and we look at it and we just read. Because I think we did critique ourselves for quite a long time, actually, that there's been a bit of a sense in JPC that we don't stick with things consistently for years and years. And I've really reflected on that, and I thought, actually, I'm proud of that, because we've constantly adapted and pivoted. We've been able to change because the world has absolutely reinvented itself.
And if it doesn't work, chuck it out.
If it
Move
doesn't
on.
work, chuck it out. But we have worked out the few things that need to be consistent. And I say that, our values are bravery, collaboration, tenacity, and originality. And we continually check that we are living them. We have those behaviours in our culture club. And if I would be more, I wouldn't be delighted, actually. I would insist we chucked the value out if we felt that we just weren't living it anymore and it wasn't relevant to us. So I think it's, leadership, but absolute collaboration and respect, and really make sure that your team are part of developing those initiatives that you run your business by.
Pam, what works?
I think creating an environment where everybody can talk about what it takes and to be an inclusive organisation, and to talk about subjects in a safe space, and to ensure that everybody's part of that conversation. And so to your earlier point, it's men, women, and so on, to act upon any of the ideas that come out of those kind of conversations. Because if you're not doing anything as a consequence of what people are telling you, then back to what Claire is saying, it's all just talk and tick box exercises. And this is where I think BIFA has been very successful, and I admire what they've done around the Women in Waste group and other initiatives they have around diversity, and the fact that they take ideas from those groups and they act upon it, because I think that sends a very strong signal. And it's not just policies, but policies can change as a consequence too.
Yeah, I think for me, we've talked a lot about mentorship, and I think that's super important. You cannot value it enough. But one part that I've seen across every size of organization that's worked, sponsorship. So actually having not just a mentor who's a sounding board and who can give you great advice and show you the path and all of that, but actually somebody who advocates for you. So whether that's a boss or someone on your team or someone more senior in a cross-functional team, having an anchor that you can just go to with a career problem, and they actually give you a concrete solution, help you navigate that organization. Somebody who knows when there's a promotion coming up is saying your name in that room and putting up for you, someone who can fight for a salary increase when you're really due one, and someone who's generally thinking of your name when they see an opportunity in another organization. So someone who can fight for you, I think, is super important. That's what's opened opportunities for me. My first boss actually hired me when she moved on from her company to a different role, and I see that as a sponsor, somebody who believes in you and who keeps giving you those chances. And I think that's really important to also get over the broken rung, like people who meet mentorship with some sort of action and make that a reality.
And that goes beyond the organization, right? So is that what Wonder Woman, for example, is all about? It's being able to connect people together so that your network grows and somebody can advocate for you beyond the walls of.
Absolutely. And Wonder Woman is just trying to forge connections, in a different environment. But most of us, like, we live in a small world. So, like, when you work with people in an organization, you're likely going to be in the same network somewhere down the line. So it's building relationships that can last beyond companies and beyond careers and beyond roles, and really forge into like a more long-term relationship. And that's what Wonder Woman tries to do. But if you're a woman in any organization, I would consider trying to find the right coaches who can be like those anchors for you across your life.
So mentorship, sponsorship, Antonio, mentorship is very much one of your things. What works? What have you seen that works across your
So for
career?
me, it's around initial presentation of your business, your team. So I'm talking very specifically here about look at your jobs, look at your job descriptions and your job specifications. When you are putting a role out, whether it be internal or external, the easy route, because you're so busy, is to cut and paste what the company's done or another one you've done, put in your requirements, and then just dish it out, because there'll be somebody in the organization that will probably look at this. Or if you go externally, you might. I'm being a bit slapdash about what I'm saying, but let's be honest, we've all been there. No, this is not the way to go about this. This is the first time somebody potentially outside your organization is going to look in and see who you are as a boss, what you're trying to create as an organization, and what's going on. You need to really look at your job specs. I mean, ideally, this goes out with a video from you that the company's made for you that has a lot of vox pops of people in the organization, how it feels to work there. Isn't this a great place? It's very diverse, it's very inclusive, great. But if not, you can really do a lot with that job spec by giving it the once over, looking at the language in it, calling out some of the benefits. There are these networks. You will get women in leadership training. You will get, I don't know, whatever the different things are, but actually using the terminology and calling out in paper some of the great programs, the great communities, actually it makes a real difference, because then you as a female, when you're looking at a new job role, actually feel, wow, this is a company that's putting on a great technology role. But actually, look, they're even writing in the job spec that there's a whole load of support around this role. So for me, I think people really need to look at that. That's the front door into the organisation, and spend a lot of time making sure it really reflects the culture, to pull it back to what we've been talking about earlier.
I really want to add to this because I was reading an article last night about gender neutral hiring and about job specifications. And there's research that I think it was McKinsey or another consulting house did, that job descriptions that have words like competitive or determined or certain specific words actually deter women from applying. And there's so much studies out there just to kind of hone in and do your homework on the right language, to your point, on a job description, really packaging it in a way that you can truly be inclusive when it's hiring, not just in the interview process, but it starts with putting out the JD there that really resonates with everybody.
I think that also then links back to your point about confidence, because, I can imagine reading that job spec and, when you can see a sort of reflection of yourself in something, it inspires your confidence. And I think just feeling I could apply for that, I could be comfortable in, this role and in this position because it's speaking to me, I think straight away then you are fostering that confidence from the outset.
So, authenticity, creating a safe space, inclusivity, this lovely piece about mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy, and getting the front door right, the job specs. That's all remarkable, solid advice. I'm super grateful and thank you all for coming here today. There's one word which we haven't used today yet, probably a good thing, which is marketing. You're all marketing professionals. We haven't touched on that at all. So I just thought, just to sort of wrap us up, is there anything specific to marketing that you would want to mention? Or is there perhaps something that we as marketers, professional communicators, or in some cases data type people, whatever, that we bring to the party that supports diversity and a better equality environment for women with our sort of marketing hats on?
Can I go first with a really obvious one, which is, as marketeers, you are in control of the image of the organization. So if you want to encourage people to consider your organization as a career path or a role there, then you need to reflect those people in your marketing, reflect their values, show people like them in the marketing. That's the basic as marketeers. You're in control of that, so you can set that agenda.
Those diverse stock images.
But it's also back to the earlier points. It's about the values. It's about the language. It's not just about the imagery itself. And it's about, again, we talk about authentic people. I think authentic organizations. That should come across in your communications as well. And admitting that you're not perfect and you haven't got it right and you're still working on it. Those are things that will make people more likely to want to be with you, work with you, partner with you.
Yeah, no, I would just say I would second what you said because one of the things I loved the most when I joined Google is the fact that they had a philosophy in their marketing is that your marketing should reflect your users. If you're not consciously including, you're consciously excluding was the principle. So we actually created committees where people from diverse backgrounds would come together and would review campaigns before they launch. And it's not just the obvious. It's not just gender, race, age bias. There are so many like micro levels of bias that you can pick up when you bring different people in the room. And I think that's important to just make yourself vulnerable, put yourself out there, really test creative, test copy, test your website before it launches. And I cannot agree with you more on the stock imagery. I'm shocked. If you look at the women wearing the pantsuits and like with perfect hair, I'm on most days making a decision whether I put dry shampoo in my hair or not. So no woman in any industry I work for has ever looked like that. So some change needs to happen there. But if you had diversity in the teams creating stock imagery to begin with, I suspect we could pick up a lot of those things early.
Look, I mean, I think the point's already made. I mean, I think the key point for me is, as a head of a marketing department, you are in a really privileged, powerful part of the organisation where you are there to control the face of the company, the narrative that goes out, the messaging. So I think it is for us as marketers to really sit down, support the leadership team, work very closely with HR, but to really help define and control the culture, the narrative, and the imagery for the feel of the company, because you are that person that can make a change.
Claire.
I think I would, echo everything that's been said here, but I think also, coming back to one of my earlier points, think about the people, the talent, the different skills, the different instincts in your team and make them a part of developing your marketing. Really find ways to break down those borders something, again, that we are always looking for is how do we bring together people? It's not just marketing, actually. It's sales, it's marketing, it's people developing the solutions, people thinking about innovation. Bring all those brilliant minds together, and you will find that you can create far more imaginative, versatile, adaptive, creative communications that are really going to appeal to the audiences they're intended for, because they are authentic, they're human, and they represent the interests of everyone.
Well, thank you for some really positive advice to finish with. Claire, Pam, Neha, Antonia, thank you so much for sharing International Women's Day with JPC, and thank you for watching.